speak tonight. This is lecture number 1530, and it's a big number, but we've been doing it since 1900. So, by way of reminder, lecture content does not necessarily reflect the opinions or positions of RES Korea. So I'd like to welcome you to this lecture, and we are joined tonight by Taylor Bradley. And Mr. Bradley is co-founder with Anthony Burt of the indie publisher Honford Star, which since its founding in 2017 has earned 2 International Booker Prize nominations, and whose books have been read and discussed by RES Korea's own Literature Club on 3 occasions. Tonight he will give us a publisher's perspective on recent literature in translation. After the lecture, there will be time for questions and for browsing books. So please welcome Taylor Bradley.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you for coming to the lecture. It's great to see everybody. Matt just explained who I am, but I will explain again, maybe in a little more detail. So I'm one of the heads, along with Anthony Bird of Honford Star. Here's us in like 2008. One of the only pictures we have together. So we met in 2008, and then we started Honford Star in 2015. And the first few years were a bit slow going for us, and we didn't get books out regularly until about 2021. Part of that was COVID, part of that was just ramping up and learning business. But yeah, so we've been a real publisher for about 5 years, but with some lead up before that. But still, why me? Why am I giving this lecture, I guess? If you've heard of us, it's probably from Curse Bunny. That's our big hit. It was nominated for the International Booker. It kind of put us on the map. But before that, first book was in 2017, Sweet Potato by Kim Dong-in. Dong-in is one of the classic early modern Korean authors from the 30s and 50s. And since then, we've done 15 Korean books into translation. Along the way, as I mentioned, our big, feather in the cap, I guess, is the 2 International Booker nominations. First for Curse Bunny, and then for Ninth Building, which is a Chinese book about it's a semi-fictionalized memoir of a man's life during the Cultural Revolution. And perhaps most prestigiously, we have been the 3-time RES Book Club selection, which I recommend everybody to go to every month. Okay, now, Honford Star's history, as I mentioned, here's us in 2008, and we were fast friends, did a lot of traveling together. Then in 2016, we got married, and in a move that surprised many people, we got married to women. And on our honeymoon, my wife and I went to the UK. We had a really good time. Here's us at Big Ben. Here's us at Buckingham Palace. Here's us doing some Harry Potter stuff. And so when we were there, we met Anthony and his wife. And that's where the first start of Honford started. We were in a pub, underground pub that was 400 years old, called Cheshire Cheese. Apparently it's Charles Dickens' old haunt. And we were both complaining about our jobs. And I said, wouldn't it be great if somebody started a publishing company and gave me a job? And then 3 months later, Anthony messaged me and basically said he is starting a publishing company. And I said, if I'm in, I'm in, right? I want to be co-founder, basically. And I should have, I should have added another picture. So it's just not my angry wife during this section. But yeah, and so from there, we had to narrow down what we're interested in, basically, right? Nonfiction, not interested. And then only translated fiction was like the next decision. And then after that, like we decided to focus just on East Asia. It's where we lived, it's where our wives were from, it's where we knew best, we were most interested in. And it kind of like relieved us of the burden of like knowing about world literature, right? East Asian literature is already like overwhelming, but if we had to do like Brazil, Nigeria, India, Ukraine, Russia, every country on earth, like just be too much, I think, for us to handle, even though many great publishers do that. And so that was like the first important decision was to focus on East Asia. And then from here, I want to just kind of explain like how I've seen the last 10 years of Korean literature evolve, like from kind of the inside perspective, right? So in 2015, there were some popular works in the West, in America and the UK. And I should specify when I talk about translation, Korean literature and translation, I'm mostly just talking about into English. I don't know about other languages very much. But the popular works in English in the UK and in the US were Please Look After Mom, The Vegetarian, and Kyeong-sook, kind of the most popular ones at the time. And as you can see, all of these are on a very similar register, right? Like literary fiction, no spaceships, no magic, and mostly just about sad people in their apartments. And so that was kind of like what was being brought into English at the time. And that also reflected, I think, where a lot of Korean literature was 10, 15 years ago. And in commercial publishing, like there wasn't a lot going on. There was some, but not a ton like this now. And a lot of it was happening in academic publishers. There many people are familiar with the Fultons, who do a lot of translation and anthologies. And there are many university presses that were kind of holding down the fort at the time, when it came to bringing Korean works into translation. And so, they were doing a very good job, but the commercial sector was kind of lagging behind. The commercial sector was kind of lagging behind what the university presses were doing. And if we look at 2015 specifically, according to the University of Rochester's 3% translation database, they try to track every book brought into translation in the United States. 13 books were translated from Korean and published in the US in 2015. So, like one was The Moving Fortress, which you can now get for between $50 and $300. So like kind of doesn't exist anymore. And then 5 of 13 were in this series from Dolby Archive. They did a big Korean literature series that I don't know, kind of nobody didn't really make a splash. There's a whole backstory too that's very fun. If you go to the Dolby Archive Substack, you get like the fun behind the scene details. But basically, released 5 books, but didn't really sell that much and didn't really make an impact, I guess. Not saying they're bad. I haven't read them. Read Emanuel. It's great. It's just, yeah, the publishers weren't doing Korean literature's much favors. Let's see. And then get into some statistics, like in 2015, the country that published the most Korean translations into other languages was Korea. So a lot of the translations that were being done were for the market, I guess, here in Seoul, according to this graph I found. And then probably a lot was being done by selections. Like I know they've done with a lot with RES legend Brother Anthony to do a lot of translations. But yeah, so they were doing great work, but again, like the commercial side abroad was kind of like not really there in a way that it is now, or maybe in a way that you would want if you're hoping to see Korean literature brought to the world. And then the second graph shows that a lot of the translations that were being done was in poetry. Yeah, again, this is not very bad. It's just, I don't know, poetry is so hard to say. Like, just from like that perspective, like it's just like doing publishing on hardwood, basically. And so yeah, like there's just not a lot being done that was getting read at the time. Whereas if we jump ahead to 2015, Kang is still around and more popular than ever, but joining her is much wider variety of books and types of books. For example, the second book called Friend is a Cthulhu-based, like Lovecraftian-based novella, written by a Korean author that is on sale in the back for anyone who's interested. The next one is like a body horror, like short story collection, basically. And then the last one is like part of the healing genre of Korean fiction that has become very popular. I will talk more about that later. And so you can kind of see like you still have your sad people and your hangangs, but you know, now you have sad people being attacked by Lovecraft, or in bakeries, right? Like kind of like a much like wider variety of genres and I don't know, like reading levels, right? Like if Hangang is the highest like reading level, you know, the healing fiction is much lower, much easier. So now in 2025, we have like a much wider like variety of books and a lot more books. Like just more books and more popular books like that you might find at the bookstore at like a Waterstones or Barnes and Nobles in the UK or North America. And so what is causing this? I think there's been three major changes that I see in the past like 10 years, that I've divided up into vibes, money, and connections. Vibes is, you know, what, you know, us Korea heads call Hallyu or the Korean Wave or BTS effects, you know, everybody's heard of it, right? Next is money. There's an organization from the government called LTI Korea, the Literature Translation Institute of Korea. They're very generous with their money. And some people say that money is more important than vibes. And I'm one of those people. I think this is probably one of the key elements. And then finally, like connections. Korean literature scene with the agents and the publishers and the translators are more focused on the international market and are more developed and professionalized. So let's talk about vibes. The first thing about vibes is here's a picture of people talking about Korean literature in 2025. This is, of course, a joke because this is from streaming, and I will bring up streaming later. That's probably going to be one of the bigger effects on the Korean literature market. It's how much movies like K-pop Demon Hunters might like come back to actually affect Korean literature. But we all know that it is popular, like Squid Games, K-pop, K-pop Demon Hunters, BTS. BTS is so popular that the books BTS reads become popular in English. So like, you can see down there in the right, there's the Goodreads list, like books recommended by Kim Jun of BTS. And he gave a real boost, I believe, to Kim Jong, born 1982. And just anecdotally from our own like Twitter, Instagram, and different media accounts, we have a lot of followers that have a little 7 after their name, their account name, which means they're part of the BTS army, right? They're a BTS fan. So it's impossible not to notice like all the BTS fans following you as somebody publishing in Korea. However, like it's very hard to obviously quantify, how many books are sold from BTS, how many books are sold from Korea fans, and just general like the Hollywood effect. And then the second vibe thing I want to talk about is the rise of healing fiction. So healing fiction is a new genre that's been coming out of Japan and Korea, and it's just kind of been selling really well, kind of like the right genre at the right time. Kind of like, like how Scandinavian noir was a real big thing for about 10 years. This is like another like I don't know, right vibes, right time. If you're not familiar with healing fiction, most of them have like a sad or down on their luck protagonist. They get saved by cozy capitalism, and they have very low stakes. So, for example, here's Rainfall Market, where a sad girl gets a golden ticket to a market run by dokabis, and that fixes her life. And then another is the Marigold Line Laundry, and this is not to be confused with the laundromat in the Yeongdong Smiley laundromat. And that piece of magical real estate is not to be confused with the magical real estate of the Hyunamdong bookshop or the second chance convenience store or the Wizard's Bakery or the Dollar Dream department store, right? So there's been 10 or 15 of these books, all based on some sort of real estate where the protagonists just, I don't know, kind of fix their lives very simply and nicely. And this kind of like feel-good fiction is really taken off sales-wise in the West. So why, yeah, like how did it hit these vibes at the right time? Um, it's a very good question. Theory one is that COVID broke our brains. I was talking to a researcher at the University of Manchester, and he's like, yeah, that's theory, like that he had hard to prove, hard to disprove, no real way to test it, but like after we all went crazy, like we just want these very simple books to enjoy. And then another theory that's put forth at the RAS book club when we were reading Rainfall Market was that under capitalism, we can only envision healing through capitalism. So because all of our lives is based around like some sort of like market transactions, what if there was just a nice laundromat near us? What if there was just a nice bakery near us? That kind of could take care of all of our problems. But for whatever reason, it's just been like really blowing up all over the world, or at least in English in translation. The second pillar in the rise of Korean literature is money. And you are not going to believe this, but publishers love money. We think it's really cool and we could always use more of it. And thankfully, there's support from the Literature Translation Institute of Korea. So over the past 25 years, LTI supported more and more works in English. You can see in the graph, that they started at the beginning of their history, not doing a ton, and then started like really ramping up over about the past 10 years. For the first part of that, a third of their books were part of the Dolphy Archive series, those books with the white covers and the shapes on them that nobody really read. But after that, they've just kept it up with a wider variety of publishers and just like a really strong amount. This is only in English too. They, have probably supported hundreds of books in other languages. And then, to really drive this point home, like in 2008, according to that Rochester University translation database that I mentioned, there are only 4 books translated from Korean into the US, but 19 from Japanese. So Korea in the past, 18 years or whatever has gone up from 4 to 25 a year. And I think a lot of this is because of the LTI support. And yeah, so let's do a little deep dive into that. Like how specifically LTI explain the increase of Korean literature. And their first way is grants. So they give pretty good grants. This is taken from their website for novels, YA novels, dramas, essays, web novels, humanities, social books. So as you can see, they have a quite broad mandate beyond just literature. And then their translation grants are, around 6 to 15 million just for the translation. For this genre. For poetry, it's a little less, but still very generous. And then for webtoons, it's up to about 6 million. And then they provide different supports by language. Translation into English, fortunately for us, is 100%. We can get 100% of the translation covered. Different languages, Russian, Chinese only goes up to 80. And then many other languages outside of Europe are about 60% covered. Yeah, so that's a lot of money. And then they also provide travel grants. So when Laura was shortlisted for the Booker, we were expected to fly her to the UK. The publisher was expected to fly her and the translator, Anton, to the UK. And, that would have been quite expensive for us. Maybe not even happened, but LTI Korea covered. And so not only do they cover the actual translations, they also will cover you bringing them to, abroad. They'll bring you to the United Kingdom, where Bora and Anton were doing interviews, events, all those type of things to promote their own books, but also to promote Korean literature in general. And so that has a real knock-on effect where year after year after year, when you bring all of these people into foreign countries, it can kind of help build the base of an author's popularity, and then that can kind of provide the foundation for the national literature's popularity. And then, um, and then like from our perspective, right, it's not just the money that helps, but it's the fact that it's offsetting a lot of risk. So each book that we do is going to be a risk, right? So most books, famously, don't make money or just break even. And then, we hope we have like a big hit, and then the big hit can kind of offset the other books. But it takes a long time to make your money back on like the mid list, on the not bestsellers, right? So yeah, and so okay, so it usually takes about 18 months from the signing of the contract to publication. That's for somebody small like us. For larger publishers with big marketing departments and contracts with audiobooks, you know, especially in America where you have to get where you're covering 1,000 different miles with the bookstores in a huge area, you know, it could be 2 years, 2.5 years between signing and publication. So in the meantime, before we're even selling the books, we have to pay for rights, we have to pay for translation, cover, typesetting, editing, printing. And so that's a lot of money to be out of 2 years, before the first dollar starts coming back. And so, and then after that, it can take another, year, 2 years to even start making money, to earn, the first dollar of profit. So publishers easily can be out of, investment for 3.5, 4 years, which is quite a bit in an industry like this, right? And so publishing a Korean book is so much less risky if there's grant attached, right? We're not messing up our cash flow for the next 3 years because we know like the Literature Translation Institute is going to cover like the translation. And so if we're looking at two similar books, maybe one from mainland China and one from Korea, it's similar topics, similar quality, we're going to be tipped towards Korean literature, right? And so you'll see this happening, not just at us, but at many publishers, even like the large ones like Penguin Random House have published books that really just seem like because they got LTI. Yeah, and so like having this support structure for the past 2 decades has really like made people, think of like, oh, I can get a Korean book. Like it's there, it gets the processes rolling, it, orients people's minds towards Korea. Like it makes us, more likely to take meetings with agents, like that type of. And then another key is the restrictions or the lack of restrictions, right? So LTI differs from a lot of state-sponsored arts funding organizations because the usual structure is that the more money they give you, the more control they're going to want to see, and like a greater restriction on the type of books. So usually it's more of the nation building type, great literature that these funding organizations want to publish. So, like, I'm an American, and so, like, let's pretend my home country cared enough about the arts to fund it, right? And under that model, you would expect them to fund translations of major works. So, if you're a Korean publisher trying to get a translation grant, they would say, like, yes, we'll give you a translation grant, but it has to be for, Herman Melville. Like, we don't care if your country is interested in Wales, you have to do Herman Melville or nothing, right? Because he's like, one of the big canonical authors. Whereas LTI has had a much more laissez-faire approach, where they let the translators, they don't have an official list or approved list. They have a list of like recommendations that they say, like, look at these great books, but those are more for promotional reasons than for like requirement reasons, right? So they will, with their more laissez-faire attitude, yeah, they let the publishers come to them. And so if the publisher wants to do a healing fiction, then they'll say, like, okay, or we do a lot of like fantasy and sci-fi. They say, okay, but we've also done, a lot of classics, Korean classics. Those also got approved. And so, like, I think so far that attitude has been very successful in letting like the foreign companies decide what will be sold in their own countries, right? So maybe an Italian publisher thinks the Italian market is different than the UK publisher, right? And so we can choose different books instead of like selecting from a pre-approved list. And so that's one of the big differences that LTI has from other like arts funding institutes globally. And I think that it's been a huge, huge help in like making Korean literature much more commercially successful. All right. Then the last thing that I've noticed in the past 10 years is increase of connections networks, right? Big increase in the number of agents, translators, and international or outward-looking publishers since we began. So let's go through these. Agents. So way more agents just in the Korea field since we began. And when we first started, we did books out of copyright, just as a way to, uh, learn about the business without having to deal with any of the really complicated stuff. But then after that, we would start buying books and we would just approach the publishers directly. There wasn't any agents or any middlemen involved. And now most publishers use agents. They'll have an agent representing the books, which is good for them for a lot of reasons, right? Like the agent can go to international book fairs. They can focus on a few like hot selling books and really promote those. And this is kind of different than when we went and were knocking on their door saying, like, please, may we buy your books? And then the second one, translators, there's more and more every. So for our first book, we just emailed a woman who was a student of the Fultons, and she did the book, but she hasn't done the translation since. Our fourth book was by the 1930s writers Kang, and we found their translator by searching Amazon, and we found somebody had uploaded one of her short stories to Amazon that they had translated. So there's a guy who had already translated one of her short stories, and like, oh, he knows who she is. Let's hire him. That guy turned out to be Anton Her, which was very nice for us. He's gone on to be kind of like a superstar translator. His name actually will sell a few books. Like people will buy it for the translation now. Part of like this was that we didn't know, we were very new and naive, and we didn't understand that if we just approached more established translators and gave them money, they would do work for us. Like they're more than happy to work with small publishers, which we didn't realize. We thought we were almost too small for that. But another reason was like there just weren't as many translators running around back then. there were some, like Kyeong, Sork and Russell, but there weren't nearly as many as now. And part of this is because of LTI again. LTI trained 9 more translators this program. Obviously, not all of these translators go on to be literary translators. Like the market can't support 9 full-time literary translators. But with this giant increase in translators, um, there becomes like more pressure, like in the sense that each of these translators probably has a book that they've been working on, that they want to promote, that they want to see get translated fully into English or, um, or whatever language they've been working into. And so oftentimes these new young hungry translators will act as unofficial agents, right? So they want to get their books translated, so they will approach publishers, they will do networking. And so having all of this like upward pressure from like emerging translators, it doesn't work obviously very often. And it's very hard to convince a publisher to publish your book. But at the same time, when you have 30 people, extra people teaching Korean literature around the world, like 10 more every year coming to you saying, how about this? How about this? Some of those do break through. And, I don't know if other languages have that. Yeah, so like they are acting as like the translator of last resort or agent of last resort pieces. And I think, yeah, having that human connection does help. And then finally, um, Korean publishers have become more and more export oriented past for 10 years from our opinion. Like we used to have to go knocking on their door, like, please, like, respond to our emails, please, we want to give you money. And it's like, oh, sorry, like our rights person went on maternity leave, like check back in a year and a half. Like it just wasn't like really there. And now most of them have agents. Now most of them see like the value of working overseas and like trying to get their books into English is like a revenue stream. Um, and so this has been good and bad for us. It's good that they want to put more effort into selling the books, but bad because a lot of publishers have like giant dollar size signs in their eyes, like a cartoon duck. And they're not wrong to be like that, to be honest. There have been some huge, like, giant deals for books that are only go on to be middle-sized hits. And so, like, they see like what some of these books were getting and they want that too. On the other hand, like some publishers don't realize you can't get like 6-figure deals for every books, not willing to part with some books that won't get sold otherwise. Yeah, so there's kind of like a cross, like the wires are getting crossed a little bit because they see us as just big Americans sitting on piles of money, and we see them as cartoon ducks with dollar signs in their eyes, and we get a little bit of attention, but overall, like, there's just a lot more professionalized work, like going into the whole space than there was before. Do you want me to wait for a picture?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Right. And so like those three things, like the vibes, the networking, and money have all like kind of formed into like pushing Korean literature from, 4 a year to 25 a year and having only one big hit. Like Please Look After Mom was 2008 or 2009. Then you go like 5 years before The Vegetarian comes out. But now, like every year, there's a lot of maybe nothing as big as Hanga, obviously, but more steady midlist sellers like going on every year. Okay, and then as I finish, maybe talk about how like the translation market will affect Korean literature going forward, right? So if that was the last 10 years, I'll finish on where I think the next 10 years are going. Right, so like as translation is being a door for Korean to the world, right? Like the doors open for both sides. So the world is going to start coming into Korean literature. It's really going to start affecting that. The first example is I'll use Curse Bunny, something close to home that I know very well. Here is the original cover for Curse Bunny in Korean. My understanding is that the book didn't sell very great. Bora was a Yonsei professor at the time. That was her full-time job, and she just wrote and got a bunch of stuff published, but not a full-time job. And then, then it became like a big hit for her and for us, and also for the Korean publisher. So after the Booker, it was released with a new cover. So the new cover starts bragging about like the international attention it received, right? The 2022 Booker-sang International Choi-jong Hubo Sunjong, right? Like it got nominated for the shortlist of the international. That's a way to sell books, promote your book. And then here's the latest cover in Korean. This is the exact same covers as ours, right? So if you go look in the back, this was the original English cover, but now the book has sold 100,000 copies in Korea, which is crazy. Like that's nuts. And so like it went from not selling very well to selling 100,000 copies, getting a new cover, and they chose our cover basically, right? Like so we've kind of affected the market a little bit now. And it's not just me saying that, right? Other people said it. Kyobo Books said it. Here's the Kyobo Book stand, where in their flagship store in Gwangwangwon, right? Like there's the 해외에서도 인정받는 작품들, like these books are popular overseas also. Is what it says, right? And you can see Chris Money, and then a bunch of books I don't care about, and the whole thing was just like, please buy these books, right? Like they're popular overseas. And then example 2, Blood of the Old Kings. This is a book released last year by Tor, the major sci-fi publishing company, probably the biggest sci-fi and fantasy publishing company that I know of at least. So they released Blood of the Old Kings, and the author, Kim Sung-il, he talks about how it was originally published in Korea by a small publisher, and he always meant for it to be the first of a trilogy. But by the time the second book was ready, the publisher couldn't take it. So either publisher was running out of money or books didn't sell enough. So the trilogy never got finished. And as he describes it, the trilogy lay forgotten, with just one book on the shelves, another on my hard drive, and the other in my dreams. And so that would change after Tor picked up Blood of the Old Kings, and they told him they wanted a trilogy, right? So he needed to dust off the sequel and then start writing a third book. And so now, like, suddenly there's 2 more entries into the canon of Korean literature, or the library of Korean literature, I suppose, because of poor publishing, right? And then the next book, the one that was forgotten, is coming out this year. And then presumably the third book to round it all out will be coming out a year or 2 later. Right, so that's another example where you see just like foreign publishers can influence directly what authors do. Um, and then, so you have to think about like, if foreign publishers are influencing the Korean market, then you have to look at what's getting translated, right? Like this guy, he's not getting translated. As like the old classics, they're not getting translated anymore, right? And then, however, um, yeah, sorry, I'll get to that. One of the results of LTI's decision to not focus on funding the classics is that many classics just are not translated, right? And so, like, we've done 4 Korean classics, which puts us in like the top like 1%. But 4 books isn't that much, you know? And we also, at the moment, don't have any more plans for like classic authors, and we don't do much like literature, like Hanggang style books. We do more like we try to hit kind of like that like sweet spot between like sci-fi and fantasy and literature, like strict literature. So like Curse Bunny is kind of like the best example we have of that. But like in the back there's like Baby Hoon, there's several other authors that are kind of this not quite literature, not quite sci-fi, but that's what we're doing, right? And so those are the styles that are going to, you know, that bounce back effect is probably going to cause more, it's going to put pressure on publishers to create more of that, right? And so like, it's hard to say how much that's affecting publishers. Like, I have no idea, and they probably don't even know. It's hard to say, like, how much your influence is, how much your decisions are influenced by anything. But like, I think it's there, right? And then there's even an example, like one example is a newish Korean publisher called Safe House, that does a lot of like great genre books. I like a lot of their stuff. But they were designed from the start to sell IP. Like they weren't a publishing company, they were like an IP content company, which kind of blew my mind. They even got a big investment from Hyundai, Hyundai Capital, or whoever does their venture capital stuff. And so their entire creation was not just about selling books, but it was about selling movies and webtoons and streaming. Which brings us to this one. Like 2 of the Safe House stories were part of this SF8 anthology, right? So there are 2 episodes in here that were based on Safe House books. And that was always their kind of original goal, was to create genre books that could be turned into streaming, be turned into overseas, hits, could be turned into webtoons or, anything. It was never meant to stay solely within the publishing sphere. And so like that's a new phenomenon, I believe. Like, that's not how Munap don't like was started, right? And so you're kind of in this situation where the winner of the Isang or Kim Tong-in Literature Awards are much less likely to get translated than like the winner of a sci-fi award here in Korea. And so like, as that money starts coming back, it's gonna start influencing publishers. And obviously like that's on me. Um, yeah, and then and to be honest though, like the streamers where the real money is at. So like as much as I'm talking about like, oh, I'm affecting the Korean market, like not not like Netflix has the potential to. So depending on how much, Netflix or Kubang or HBO or whoever try to bring Korean books into series, I think that's like where I would be watching to see like how that affects Korean literature in the future. Um, yeah, and so yeah, so right now I think Korean literature is kind of in a transitional period of becoming globalized. I mean, Korean literature, modern Korean literature has always been globalized, like to a degree. Like the novel and the short stories are both forms that came to Korea through Japan. And so, like, there's always been a foreign influence on Korean literature, but like, I expect that to start ramping up more and more 10 years as kind of the counterpart to the increased Korean translations abroad. Yeah, and so that's what I've prepared today. I'd be happy to take any questions. Matt, is there time?
Oh, yeah, of course. And there's two questions online here.
Okay.
Um, but first, maybe I'll pass this around later. So, has LTI's funding policy changed over the years? We used to get a lot of worthy, uncommercial literature, for example, stuff addressing issues of national division, but interesting and rewarding to read. And now we get a lot of commercial, disposable literature, such as the young adult healing fiction, thrillers, etc.
Mm, not in the 10 years that we've been. So at least from our perspective, maybe before that, maybe in the first 10 years, 10, 15 years before us, that might have been the case. I wouldn't be surprised because that's kind of more of the normal route that international funding organizations take. However, I can't say for sure.
So does anyone else have questions?
Hi, Tom Coiner here. As a old marketing guy, I see everything you've been talking about until the very last minute as basically on supply side as opposed to demand side. And the idea of being IP focused as a new idea, well, no, it's not a new idea. It's an old idea, at least 10, 15 years, where everything is being kind of architected, if you will. On, first of all, where is the real market demand anywhere? Specifically, the US would be a good starting point because of its wealth. But also, how can I get this structured so we can have, selling of manga or movies or even breakfast cereals in the future? And then kind of putting the whole package together. So the translations are becoming less and less of an issue. I mean, you have AI where a good translator can use an AI translation and edit as opposed to going from scratch, although that may not work in certain situations like poetry. But at the same time, I just was a little bit, frankly, frustrated listening to your lecture because you're talking about trying to push through the soft envelope to get your writers out into the world market when you need to obviously understand what the world market is looking for, or hoping to find maybe not just specific translator or author, but has a particular interest in a topic matter. So I would like to get your comments about that.
Yeah, I think so. Part of that, you have the healing fiction, which I think is kind of a demand-driven phenomenon. So, like, if you talk to like in the behind the scenes stuff, like you talk to agents or whatever, um, if you talk to agents or whatever, like they don't, none of us are really interested in fiction, but we all do it because the people love it and we love the people's money. And so, like, that has been more like a demand-driven thing. But at the same time, like, why is Korea taken off, like Taiwan or mainland China, right? It's not like there was a new demand, like organic demand for Korea, in the sense that, like, I mean, there's like the vibes and stuff, but like, any country could have become Korea if they had paid, publishers to publish their stuff, right? Like some of the demand, some of the like so the money is there. So we choose Korea over Taiwan. So now there's a Korean book on the market that wouldn't have been there otherwise. It could have been Taiwan, it could have been China, it could have been Vietnam, it could have been anywhere. But because of LTI, it's now Korean, right? And so like after 20 years of that, like that's created a market for Korea. Yeah.
Yes, I have two questions. First question is, you're talking about the role of the grant. So I'm curious, how much is that in terms of the overall cost of publishing a book? And the second question is just my curiosity. When the publisher was using your English cover for corresponding, was there also some money involved in that?
Okay. Yes. So the translation is covered like almost 100% most of the time. So like, yeah. So like it's a huge chunk of money basically. And then secondly, and then they provide publication grants, which is not 100%, but like for the scale we're working at, is quite a bit. Um, Hong Kong's publishers will have print runs 10 or 20 times bigger than us. LTI is not going to have that, but they know they're going to make that money back in a couple of months or whatever. Anyways, so LTI doesn't need to cover that. And then with the cover, we just had the rights to the English language cover. So that cover has been on a lot of different languages books, like the Polish edition and the Italian edition and stuff. And that, so they approached the original cover designer, paid him those rights.
Thank you so much indeed, Tara. I appreciate your passionate. Well, two questions. My name is long-term member audience. Well, of course, as far as the clinical success of any publication in the future, so depends on many variety of reasons. But these days, for example, Hong Kong or Kim Il-sung, who's one of the famous lady poets, got the prize from Canada a couple of years ago. And normally, the individual winning global awards. That's good. But what about the systemic promotion? I think which is so important, right? That's marketing or advertising. That's of course, BTIs, giving them the orange, that kind of testimonial witness is one of the most, influential impact, of course. The average, the advertising publication that was very costly, causing factor. What about you? Number two, when it comes to, still English fever is going on in Korea, right? Somehow English learning. What about the Korean audience? Do they have that kind of, strategy targeting Korean audience for them to read, this kind of, translation works? For example, my idea is why don't you put them together? English translation plus Korean original text together. It's much easier for the Korean readers or students to read it.
So yeah, like as far as marketing and stuff goes, most publishers have their sales and distribution teams. So like, we have a distributor and sales team that works with them, and they will go to bookstores and like start promoting everything that way. The larger publishers, Penguin Random House, I said, all of them, they are going to have dedicated like marketing and publicity teams. But the past 10 years with the internet stuff, the way you get the word out about books has really changed a lot, with TikTok and Instagram and all of that. And so, now a lot of it is just putting a bunch of books into the hands of influencers on TikTok and Instagram and like hoping for the best, hoping that works out. And then, sorry, the second question was
Korean.
Korean audience, yes. So like, let's say we wanted to publish a bilingual version of our new books coming out, the Lovecraft novellas. We don't have the infrastructure here. Well, so we'd have to print a bunch of books. We don't know how many. Do we think we can sell 500, 1,000, 2,000? And the smaller the print runs you go, the higher the unit cost, right? So like, maybe we could sell 200 books, but printing 200 books is going to be quite expensive. And so like, it's just the unit cost is going to be hard. And then we'd have to distribute, right? Because like, I don't want to carry all the books in my apartment. And so we'd probably talk to Cash. They're like, Cash, can you distribute our books? Okay. But then like, then there's the sales team, right? Like, we don't have a sales team in Korea. And then, right, and so like, doing a specialized, localized edition would just be very difficult for anybody to do. I could probably pull it off because I'm based in Korea, but it would be too expensive to make it worth it. And then other publishers like Algonquin, who does Boruto's American, like distributes it in America, they've never been to Korea. They don't know. They're not Korea experts. They don't know anything. So like, they have no system or organization in place to that. Yeah. Yeah. Asia Publishing, the Korean publisher, they publish short bilingual stuff for Korean market. But other than them, yeah, it's kind of
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. You always talk about dead tree versions. You haven't mentioned anything about digital versions of your books.
yeah, we have digital versions too.
So, I mean, you don't have inventory costs, everything else needs.
But
You have to have the cost of digitalization and up that there's a royalty assigned to that.
yeah, but like going through if we wanted to publish a digital version of a bilingual digital version, we'd have to buy the rights to the Korean version, right?
Or just in general, I'm not talking about necessarily bilingual, but any of your books, why not just go digital?
They are all digital. So like all of our books are available on your Kindle and stuff, and so
Right.
yes, they're all digital.
So your problem seems to be with your paper stock versus
Winning. Yes. I mean, but like most of our books are sold through paper stock. Most books in general are. The digital versions kind of ate the mass market paperback, the old style, like 20 years ago, the really, really, really cheap stuff that kind of got eaten by digital, and the digital sales have kind of plateaued at around, I think, like 20% of the market or something. It's not as much as one might think. And but yeah, I mean, like all our books are available on digital. It's kind of become a normalized part of the market now. Yeah, I mean, it's there. We're happy to have it. It's not as much free money as one might expect, like because you sell it for a cheaper price, and there are middlemen involved who do all the distribution, and then like Kindle wants their cut, Amazon wants their cut, so like it's less money than one might expect. But yeah, it's just there. I mean, it's there. It's like a nice part of business.
Are there any other questions?
Didn't you say there were two?
No. I was curious about your price points, because when I was looking at your website, I was like, these aren't expensive.
These aren't.
They aren't
Oh.
expensive. Yeah,
Oh,
I thought in comparison to a lot of,
Check again tomorrow.
maybe not.
Maybe you're used to academic books.
well, there's that, but I thought they were,
Yeah, we have a lot of discussions about this. They, so books over the past 10 years they were underpriced just in general. Now they've really gone up, especially in North America, where like paper was really at a premium for a while. We get around that by printing in Korea. So that's one of our books are basically on par with other publishers. However, because we print in Korea, we can pay for nicer paper, more cover stock, like thicker cover stock, more finishes for like a similar price. So that's kind of like our distributor and our sales team are always like, yeah, like they get a lot of good feedback about that. And that's thanks to like connections in Korea there. However, I don't think we're that much cheaper than our competitors. Yeah. I hope more people think like that though. Oh, question?
Thank you. It's a bit more lighthearted. It's just a two-part question.
Okay.
When you mentioned that cozy capitalist
Yeah.
tribe curious, do Koreans themselves actually enjoy these books and see themselves in them? And then also, are the publishing houses, you said we don't really like them, then does that mean you don't really think much of them? And then are they selling these books to Americans? They know cozy fantasy is a trend. Do you selling something that is really meet their standard, but they know there's fire?
Yeah, so I don't wanna, I can't psychologize about the readers anymore, but like they sell well in Korea. It's not just the healing fiction, but healing nonfiction. It's really taken off. There's a whole article, I think in the Korea Times a day or two ago about how like books like I Want to Die, but I Want to Eat Tteokbokki have really taken off in Korea, just really selling like hotcakes. And if you go to Gyobo and you look at the English or Korean language section, you'll see that like there's a ton of healing, the healing fiction books. So yeah, that's definitely like a Korea based trend. And then yeah, behind the scenes, it's I don't know. We're all like literature nerds, so like the books don't do a ton for us necessarily, but like you know, somebody has to pay Squarespace. You know, like someone has to pay the distributor. Like, and it can't all be like we can do it because we have like we've avoided it because we have like the overhead stuff. You know, we don't have any employees. You know, like if Penguin Random House can't pay, doesn't make any money, they have to fire someone. You know, we have the luxury of not having any money compared to Penguin Random House, so we can be a little more picky. But um, yeah, like it's a financial decision. Yeah, there too.
Financial stash, or is it text itself that you don't find highbrow? It's their basic last.
Just finally simple and boring. It's like, yeah, like,
Spot.
yeah, like I don't want to like be like I don't want to focus too much on it because like I don't I think people should read. I'm happy with people who are happy when they, right, like not everybody has to read what I like. even though that would be great.
Thank you. Kind of jumping off that, you mentioned how Honford Star has kind of this niche in terms of publishing sort of like literary sci-fi genre blend books. If I guess if money wasn't an issue at all, like what would be the kind of Korean literature that like ideally you want to present to the world?
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's definitely it. Like, we are too small to fail, right? So like, we have had, we have been doing this for without paying ourselves for most of our, like, we only started paying ourselves in the past year and a half. So like, a lot of this has just been a passion project and based on what we want to do, right? So like, yeah, so like, Antony has a little bit more highbrow taste than me, a little more literature, and I'm a little more populist, but like, the difference between us isn't that very big. And so we basically published what we want without too much worry about the commercial market. So far, if we get big enough to start hiring employees that we need to like keep around, that might change.
And then how about in general, like what kind of Korean literature would you like to see more of translated into English?
Honestly, the classics, as much as I say, like, we've only been doing like, the sci-fi, the blend, like, the dream of publishing Toji by Park Kyung-mi. It's like 25 volumes. It's would cost like $200,000 to do. It's just not feasible at all. But man, that'd be so cool. Yeah, so like, honestly, it'd be great to see more classics. But yeah, not a lot of money there.
I wanted to follow up on his question. So some of the problems you mentioned, such as distribution costs, might be alleviated if you were to publish like a digital only version, or if you're not sure of demand, maybe start with digital only, and then maybe once you can properly evaluate demand, switch to or even like print on demand uh, model. That might be something that would not have distribution cost, at least not initially, and then maybe is that something you've considered?
So print on demand, when it works, so how, like, it basically eats all our profit. We use it for some of our backlist, but printing one book at a time is quite expensive as a unit cost. And then I think if we just released it digitally only, it would just flop, because our sales team can't promote it, right? Our sales team can't go to the bookstore and say like, hey, we have this great new book for you. Like, you guys like these guys, like, hey, they know who we are, right? And so like, they'll just show up and be like, oh, this is only digital. And so like, without our sales team promoting it to bookstores, we would rely on like our social media and stuff. And to be honest, like, we're in an age where like social media, inorganic social media doesn't work so hard, right? You have to kind of like the girlies on Book Talk find your stuff, right? And so the way a lot of publishers do that is by sending everybody who asks for a ARC, an advanced reader's copy, like a copy, right? And so then they take pictures with it. Then they go on their YouTube. Then they go on Facebook, wherever, and like, that's how a lot of the marketing is done. But people want physical versions to take pictures of and stuff. And so like, nobody wants a picture of Kindle and so like, and to be honest, like a lot of our main customer isn't the end consumer almost, it's bookstores, right? And so like, we have to focus on like getting the bookstores product because they are the ones who will give us like a good spot. And a lot of our sales just come from browsing. Yeah, especially as a small company, larger companies can have huge publicity budgets for their big authors. That's not really feasible for us.
But what about like just an initial, just to evaluate demand, style, digital release, that would be followed with a print release if you see successful demand?
Well, at that point, we've already paid for translation and paid for rights. And not many publishers in Korea are interested in selling rights to a book and then making selling 10 copies, right? Like we usually have a clause in the contract that says initial print run will be X. So like I don't even know if we get the rights. Yeah.
All right, first of all, I work with about half a dozen book reviewers. One of them tolerates ebooks. They all prefer print.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like that's what even young people want is a physical thing, even if it's not influencers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't really want to talk about that. I don't care. We print on demand transactions and it's more expensive for Eden. So yeah, that's why we charged them last year. I was curious though, my question was about science fiction. I'm gonna ask a really dumb question. I liked science fiction when I was young and then I moved to Korea.
Okay.
And I just didn't see it anywhere, So when I started seeing everybody talking about Korean science fiction and stuff, I was like, what? I want to know, like, is what we're seeing that kind of feedback that you're saying, like overseas popularity is coming back to Korea, or is this really not representative of Korean readership? Like, how is it changing? Is it coming out? Like,
Yeah, so well, the main Korea sci-fi people are living like the OGs of Korea sci-fi are in their 50s now. Right? So like one of the biggest authors, Juna, they are famous for having no public presence. Their author picture is a bunny, don't know age, don't know gender, don't know where they live, anything about them. And they got their start on like the internet, basically. They would write back in the days of like blogs of the 90s, like they would just put their stuff up. I mean like an archive of our own, like basically like fan fiction, that kind of like what we think of fan fiction now. And they were able to parlay that basically into writing. And then so that's one. Kim Bo-young, she's another famous author who's very big in sci-fi. She's 50, 55 maybe maximum. And so like it's just kind of a newish genre in literature. There has been quite some stuff from before, but it is very new. And when you read their stuff, you can see how foreign influenced it is. So I just read a book by Juna and like constant references to Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, like deep cut Americana, like the spaceships are named after Alec Guinness, Laurence Olivier, Gary Cooper and John Wayne. Like it's just like very like steeped in like overseas culture. So like the original people who were interested in this genre were also just interested in foreign stuff. Yeah. However, the newer ones have been building on it. So yeah, the original feedback loop was new, but like kind of the newer ones, like,
We should finish up. We gotta be out of here in 10 minutes.
Okay, out of the building in 10 minutes.
Okay, the thing I know.